In this session, we're going to talk about wean age. It's a topic that most production systems spend a decent amount of time looking at, and we've got some really good presenters this morning, and I'm going to serve as more of a glorified moderator this morning to kind of introduce you to the topic and get us all thinking for the next two speakers that are really going to kind of dive deep into this area for us. So part of New Fashion, we're part of the Triumph team, and we have an integrated research committee called the Quark team. And my first meeting, Christensen's would be a big part of that, and Dr. Boyd and the Hanor team. And I remember this quote from Dean when I asked him what his thoughts were on wean age, and he said that early wean age is amongst the most devastating diseases that the U.S. swine industry has ever faced. And so that kind of sets the tone for kind of how some of the production systems kind of value that. But there's a lot of things that go into determining what that optimal wean age is. And, you know, from a growth performance standpoint, you know, there's a lot of objective trials that have certainly highlighted that. But on the production side, you know, it really comes back to the cost and the return. And so that's how we get to the definitive term of your optimal wean age. So this morning, again, I'm just going to give you a brief introduction and some current trends. We have Dr. Adam Moser from Michigan State University that's going to talk about the biological and the production basis of optimal wean age. And then we have Dr. Cameron Schmidt from the Pipestone Systems Group is going to talk about their thought process and a recent field trial that they completed. So what are some of the things that we talk about, or some of the things that we really want to focus on when we're really trying to dive in and determine what that optimal wean age is? And now one of the biggest ones that comes to mind for me and that's consistent across most of the data sets is the reduction in mortality as we increase that age of pig that we're putting out into those nurseries or those weaned finish barns that we're double stocking. Obviously, there's a cost of production associated with that as we look at the crate space at the sow farm that it takes to achieve those. I think a lot of sow farm people are notorious. We work through these wean age problems and we add another 40 or 50 crates to the farm, and what do? Well, they breed more sows. Wean age stays the same, but we increase the output out of the farm. And so while we've maybe inherently cut the cost of production for those wean pigs coming out of that sow farm, we really didn't get the benefit that was really sold to us whenever we were going to add those additional crates to that sow farm. Finishing space in your flow is also a consideration as you have inherent growth benefits downstream from the growth performance of the offspring from those sows that have a longer lactation length. The subsequent reproductive performance of our sows, when we consider some of those things. The nutritional changes, you know, what kind of diet complexities that we need to be thinking about when we're weaning a 14, 15, 16-day-old pig versus a 22, 23-day-old pig. And then obviously, as we have a room full of veterinarians amongst us, certainly from the health side, some vaccine efficacy and some immunity. And Dr. Moser is going to do a nice job for you this morning highlighting more of those gut functions and what happens. So as I started to prepare for some of this, I was interested in really what the industry has put together. And since I'm not a K-State grad anymore, getting a lot of papers is sometimes difficult without a pricey subscription. But we use PigChamp in our system, and so I looked at the National Pork Board average for wean age and those trends over the last 10 years and compared that to the PigChamp. And what I thought was interesting is they both tell the same story, that we're increasing wean age across the industry. But what I thought was interesting was you've got a 2-day different or a day and a half difference between what the PigChamp benchmarks would have reported for last year versus the National Pork Board. And obviously there's some systems that don't use PigChamp that most likely have a longer wean age that's attributed to that. But you get a little bit of a different answer of how quickly the industry is changing to increasing wean age. And so if you just put a simple linear regression through that, the slope is about 3 times as high for the National Pork Board data versus the PigChamp data. And I thought that was interesting as you kind of look across systems to see what we're doing. And it appears that we're we're kind of plateauing somewhere between that 20 and 22 days. And so the question is, well, maybe it's somewhere in there, maybe our optimal. Within New Fashion, I worked with some of our production staff and looked at our wean age, and so we're going to talk about wean age, but in our system we've been relatively constant for the last 3 years between 19 and 20 days. But I will tell you that we've begun this year to make some investments on our sow farms, and our target moving forward is 21 to 22 days wean age, and so that's what we're working towards. Now again, we have to kind of keep our thumb on those sow farm managers, Dr. Lewis, to make sure that we don't just breed more sows and that we actually use those extra crates for the wean age. So some suggested benefits from past research, and we've talked about this, and I know some of these papers are a little dated, but they're extremely relevant. As we looked at the improvement in subsequent breed back, total born, and live pigs per sow. And today what we're really going to focus more on is the improved nursery and wean to finish performance, both in terms of growth and mortality. I think one of the cornerstone papers that we all kind of come back to is Dr. Roger Main's data back in 2004. And this data set is very strong. And so I was talking with Hyatt Frobos the other day about my lit review and just wondering if my skills were just a little rusty of how well I wasn't good at digging up papers, because there's not a lot of published data on wean age greater than 21 or 22 days. Now, integrated systems have done some of that work, but that has not been shared as extensively with the greater outside community in the industry. And so as we kind of look back at Roger's data, you know, obviously it's a great data set. Looking at, we would classify probably a segregated early weaning pig at 12 days of age, all the way up to 21 days of age. We get a nice improvement in gain. But the one that probably gives us the most immediate return is the mortality change. And so as you look at Dr. Main's data, when we look at that, for every linear change per day, when we look at that, the wean to finish average daily gain goes up about 10 grams for every day increase in wean age. But again, the one that really sticks out again is that 0.5% reduction in mortality for those downstream pigs as we increase that wean age each additional day. As we look at the cost, and I went back through his cost and the corn prices, and some of those prices were surprisingly relevant today, even in our market. But as we look at some of his cost parameters based on the days to market, taking about 2 days off of our days to market for every change or increase in wean age. But again, it comes back here to this cost, as Roger is suggesting that we get about a 37-cent reduction in cost per head sold as we increase that wean age for every day. A little bit more recent data set that the Honor group has put together for us has showed us that wean age is probably more important in flows that are health challenged than those flows that are extremely healthy. And I think we can all get behind that and support that. And you can see that you know, the mortality obviously is starting a little higher at our 18 days wean age than it is on the 18-day wean age for the high health, but it surpasses that reduction to the tune of about 4% change from an 18 to 24-day-old pig. And so I think that that's a number that most production systems, again, can support. As Wayne Cast always says, a sold pig never dies, and a mortality is certainly a cost that we all know how to calculate. As we look at the average daily gain, the benefits, again, are important, but they're probably not as strong as an improvement as we saw there in the mortality between the poor and the high health system. So I got to thinking, so we have all these growth performance benefits, but the most immediate or the initial cost that we're going to see is at the sow farm. And so I was interested to understand, what does that initial investment kind of look like to get us all thinking of, okay, I'm going to increase the wean age. What do I need to do at my sow farm? What kind of capital investment am I going to look at or going to need to put forth? And what kind of return am I going to need to break even? So I used the example in our system. We mainly have 6,000 head sow farms as our model. So I used a 6,000 head filtered sow farm, current wean age of 18 days, They had 829 crates. And something, and some of you in the room may be more acquainted with this cost per crate, but $6,200 was the number that I came up with our construction team is kind of a ballpark figure for what that would be. I thought that was a pretty substantial cost when you think about, well, what that crate is, but you have all the supporting infrastructure, you have the concrete, you have the building, you have the feed line. There's a lot more to it than just going to Thorpe and buying a crate. And so $6,200 was the number that I used. And what I looked at is I wanted to schedule that out to determine what was the cost or the break even or the return that I needed per wean pig to increase the wean age by 1 day. And so what I calculated was to go from 16 to 17 days. It was about $256,000 to put on 41 extra crates. And if you spread that across either a 1 to a 3 year return, I needed an additional 50 cents a pig for the next 3 years to pay for that 1 day initial investment. And so when you look through there, there's some costs there, right? You know, when we talk about things in swine production systems, I think we're very good at managing cost. And I think a lot of times we get so caught up in the cost that sometimes we don't always do a good job of looking at the marginal return. So again, about a little over 50 cents per wean pig to increase wean age by 1 day, and that's over a 3 year period, just to pay back for that initial investment. That's not any additional labor. That's just purely the construction cost. But if you wanted to take that from 18 to 22 days, and the reason that I chose 18 to 22, when you look at the PigChamp benchmarks, the lower 10th or the bottom 10th percentile compared to the upper 10th percentile was a 4 day difference. So if you want to take yourself from the bottom of the pool to the top of the pool for wean age, it was about $2.16 per wean pig to overcome that initial investment to increase the wean age by about 4 days. So what do we need to know? As I kind of stated before, we need some more data past 22 days of wean age. Again, looking at subsequent sow performance, determining the overall producer cost and return, because that's one of the things that Dr. Frecking is going to ask our crew when we push forth that we want to increase the wean age. Again, is what is the cost, and what is the return, and what is the benefit. For us, we also have a flow called old-fashioned pork. It's our niche pork production. On that system, we have a 28-day-old pig, and I did not have that in the initial slide, but that's an ABF program, and so I think that this obviously becomes important. Wean Age does as we look at reducing antibiotics and some of these niche programs that don't allow antibiotics, and with that mortality improvement, there most likely is that return there. And then more information on vaccine efficacy. In our group, New Fashioned Pork hasn't used any feed-grade meds for quite some time, thanks to Dr. Murray and Dr. Levi Johnson and all their work. And you know, that's an important part of us, as Deb kind of explains through what those inherent benefits are. So again, I started with the comment from Dr. Boyd about the wean age is amongst the most devastating swine diseases. But as Dr. Gary Lewis tells us, we reserve the right to get smarter.